32nd in points to a win and you're in. The playoff format comes into question yet again, but at least we had option tires. Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, my name is Taylor and welcome to Above the Yellow Line, where we do motorsports media your way, talking about NASCAR literally all the time. And right now we're talking about Richmond Raceway for the Cookout 400. And this one was messy at the end. Now, from topping the charts in practice to qualifying 6th, Austin Dillon actually was potentially a favorite going into this weekend, which is shocking considering that the 3-team only had 2 top 10s this season so far. They were 32nd in points. But this weekend, RCR came back from the Olympic break and said, hey, we're going to give you a race-winning car. We have something to prove. And they did it. The 3 was fast. So fast, actually, that as the laps were winding down, Austin Dillon was actually leading Denny Hamlin, and all he needed was no cautions, and he would have come home victorious. And unfortunately, that's too much to ask, because with 2 to go, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. just totally missed a corner, got into Ryan Preece, and we went into an overtime finish. The number 3 crew did their job on pit road, got him out first over Joey Logano and then Denny Hamlin. Then we have the restart where Austin Dillon started on the inside, Joey Logano started on the outside, and that 22 on that overtime restart just did well. He did so well, he got into that first position, and at that point, we thought Joey Logano had this race won, but that wasn't the case. In those final corners, Austin Dillon got to the bumper of Joey Logano, spun him, and then when Denny Hamlin had the wins in his sights, Austin Dillon right rear hooked him, and Austin Dillon won the race again, 32nd in points to a chance to win a championship at Phoenix. Absolutely insane. And of course, this is possible because NASCAR amended that top 30 in points rule that no longer applies here. If you are a full-time driver in NASCAR, in the Cup Series, any series, etc., you win a race, you lock yourself into the playoffs. And also, if as fate would have it, this is the 3,333rd start in the Cup Series for RCR as a team, according to Daniel McFadden. So if you believe in the numbers and the stats, this was just meant to be today. And if you want my opinions, I am very mixed on this. I felt really bad for Austin Dillon when the caution came out because he was going to win this race outright. But unfortunately, though, a lot of times that happens and you just have to go to the overtime restart, race your tail off to get the win that was rightfully yours. What I don't like and I can't stand is right rear hooking somebody for a win. We've seen at Daytona, of course, this isn't Daytona, this is a short track, where that's caused horrific wrecks. Denny Hamlin, unfortunately, has been right rear hooked way too many times the past few seasons, and in the Gen 7 car, even though it's much safer than before, it's still a danger to do. And we've seen bump and runs for race wins before, thinking about Martinsville in particular with the final race before the championship 4. We see it all the time. But this, though, felt different. Typically, there's only one car you hook or you spin. This was 2. And typically, when we see intentional right rear hooks, there is either a penalty or a suspension or something of the sort that NASCAR dishes out. So will we see some penalty for Austin Dillon? Sometimes moves like that at the end of the races are kind of deciphered differently than if it were made in the middle of a race. Austin Dillon admitted intent after the race saying, quote, "I hate it, but I had to do it." And a screenshot from Jeff Gluck on his social media accounts had radio chatter from that 3 team saying, quote, "I don't care how you do it," and quote, wreck him. And Richard Childress denied any of those comments on the radio following the race, to which Matt Weaver then played the audio for him. Bob Pockrass confirmed that it was the spotter that said these things, and RC said, quote, "Well, if he did it, he did a good job because it won him the race." So we heard from the 3 teams side. Let's hear from the other drivers that were involved. Denny Hamlin said, quote, "It's obviously foul, but it's fair in NASCAR," kind of saying, hey, you bump and run to win races sometimes, and that's kind of allowed. He also said that this sets a bad example for all the short track racers coming up through the ranks, letting them know that this type of racing is okay. But he also said he understands why Austin Dillon did this. He was desperate, but also said he needs to understand that he's going to have to pay a price for what he did. JGR personnel, Denny Hamlin and Chris Gabehart, went to the NASCAR hauler following the race, according to Kelly Crandall. When Denny Hamlin came out, Kelly asked for comment. He said, "You should probably talk to them. You know, this was a private conversation. I don't really want to say what was said." So there was definitely a discussion between Hamlin, his team, and NASCAR following the race to kind of figure out what happened. So that was from Hamlin. Logano, on the other hand, was a lot more unfiltered and was rightfully so frustrated. Here is what he had to say.
What happened down there?
It's chicken shit. There's no doubt about it. He's 4 car lengths back. Not even close. Then he wrecks the 11 to go along with it. And then he's going to go up there and thank God and praise everything with his baby. It's a bunch of BS. It's not even freaking close. I mean, dude, I get it, bump and run. I get it. I didn't back up the corner at all. He came in there and just drove through me. It's ridiculous that's the way we race. Unbelievable. I get bump and runs. I do that. I would expect it. But from 4 car lengths back, he was never going to make the corner. And then he wrecks the other car. He wrecks the 11 to go with it. So what a piece.
And the first thing I saw online with all of this was, well, Hamlin and Logano have wrecked people for wins before too. So this is very hypocritical. Logano admits that. That's hypocritical of him. I think Denny Hamlin even said it at one point during his interviews at the night. So they're not questioning like, hey, this is hypocritical. But again, it's a very odd place and time to dump somebody, wreck somebody, 2 cars, right rear hook at Richmond of all places to get a win. So it just didn't feel right. So I don't know how NASCAR will handle this, if they will issue a penalty. Elton Sawyer spoke with the media after the race and basically said this was awfully close to the line. When we talk about, does this step over the line? Does this cross a line or not? What is acceptable racing? What is not? He also said they'll review all video, all audio, and if it comes to the point where they need to issue a penalty, that'll be announced on Tuesday. All of this to say, though, moves like this only happen because of the play box that NASCAR puts these drivers in. With this playoff format that we have, where you win and you're in regardless of your point standings, is dangerous and is going to cause drivers to pull these moves. They're going to do whatever it takes, even if it means wrecking half the field, to get a chance at fighting for a championship in Phoenix. I know when we discuss the playoff format, there's positives, it's very entertaining to watch, but there's also negatives where it could produce what the fans call a Mickey Mouse championship. It can cause these types of wrecks to make it into the next round. It also seems to favor wins over overall consistency because when we look at the playoff kind of bubble right now around that cutoff line, you see drivers like Martin Truex Jr., who could be in danger of not making the playoffs, even though his season's been pretty consistent. Now that Austin Dillon occupies one of those 16 spots, there are only 3 drivers above that cutoff line that have not won a race yet that are in jeopardy of not making the playoffs. Like I said, Martin Truex Jr. plus 78 to the good now. He did not finish this race because of another Joe Gibbs Racing engine issue, and I had hoped that when they came back from the Olympic break, they had fixed this. It's plagued Ty Gibbs and the Xfinity Series team as well for Joe Gibbs Racing. It looks like they still have some work to do. So Martin Truex Jr. loses some of the ground that he made above that cutoff line and could be in jeopardy of not making it if there is a new winner. Speaking of another driver that lost some ground, I just talked about him, Ty Gibbs. Fortunately, not an engine issue this race. However, is now only 19 above that cutoff line, came into this race plus 42. A driver that did make some gains above the cutoff line, though, and is now above the cutoff line, Bubba Wallace, came back from some pit issues earlier in the race to finish this race in 5th. So very good for him, but it's really tight around that line because right below, tied with -3, we have Chris Buescher and Ross Chastain. What did Chris Buescher in for this race that he probably should have gotten a top 10 in is that there was a left side tire on a pit stop that was not secure. He tried to leave the pit box. His team called him back in. He backed it up. They got the tire tight and he went back onto the track a lap down and he kind of stayed that way the rest of the race. For Ross Chastain, it wasn't a bad race for him, all things considered. It's just everyone around him in points did a little better than him or maybe a little worse. And of course, a new winner throws a wrench in some things. So not bad for Ross with a 5th place finish, but again, it's just how the playoffs work. So we have Dillon, Hamlin, Reddick, Wallace, and Chastain, your top 5. 6th, Christopher Bell. He could have had a race-winning car if it weren't for a pit speeding violation. This is the 3rd Richmond race in a row, according to the broadcast, where he has sped on pit road. He was able to fight back from that, but unfortunately was not a race win. And 7th, we have Kyle Larson, and he was actually on the same strategy as Tyler Reddick during stage 2, where they only pit once during that stage. This gave them good track position, and everything was just good and dandy. So maybe not the speed we expected from Larson, but they were really just kind of learning at this point with when should they use the option tire or not. Cliff Daniels before the race had said they were being a student of the game per se. So definitely learning for future application at other short tracks we go to, especially in the playoffs. Then we have Carson Hocevar in 8th, his best finish since Gateway, where he also finished 8th. Solid run for him. I'm always so impressed by Carson and how he does in this equipment. It's phenomenal. But 9th, we have Chase Elliott, and 10th, Daniel Suarez, and he impressed me this race, quite honestly. His team gambled with strategy. He and Michael McDowell were the only 2 cars to start stage 2, and the first cars all race to try those option tires that gave them great track position, and literally, the start of stage 2, Daniel Suarez was outside the top 15. In like 12 laps, he raced to 1st place. That tells you the power of these option tires. And I'm thrilled that it actually showed a difference between the option and our regular tire that we have, because at North Wilkesboro, that was not the case. These tires were kind of a get out of jail free card for some teams when they had issues on pit road. It allowed them to make up precious time. In other cases, it was, we're going to use these 2 sets of optional tires for the end of the race to get a leg up on the field. And it was really fun to see these teams play with strategy in an otherwise dull race that Richmond kind of produces. We have really long green flag runs, and that can be a little boring to watch. And when the ratings kind of dip for Richmond, that's kind of why. So seeing this option tire give these teams some sort of strategy to play around with and something that the fans can really latch onto was really fun to watch. I will say though, Cliff Daniels, other crew chiefs, and even 2 drivers like Denny Hamlin, Chris Buescher, for instance, are advocating that that optional tire, that softer tire, become the primary tire that we use at these short tracks. So we'll have to see what NASCAR and Goodyear decide to do moving forward. So thinking of rating this race, this was quite honestly the best Richmond race I can remember in quite some time. I remember the spring race when we actually were on that wet tire. It produced some really fun racing, and then the rest just kind of went down the hill from there. But this was pretty good. Besides the end of the race, this is a solid like 68% for me. Definitely above the yellow line, one of the better Richmond races I had seen. Entertaining because of strategy. What's not to love about that? So what did you think of how this race played out? Let me know in the comments below. But with that, we are done with this episode of Above the Yellow Line. Make sure to follow us on all social media pages. Go to AboveTheYellowLine.com to find our social media and more exclusive content, as well as going to TobyChristie.com to hear the latest NASCAR news, updates, and more. We're going live this Thursday night with Ryan Roulette, the ARCA driver, so make sure to tune into that to ask him some questions and to talk with us about this upcoming race weekend for Michigan. So we'll see you all there. Thank you all so much for the support, and until next time, I'll see ya. Bye.